Hello, I'm Chad Saley with Comp Health. I'm sitting down once again with Dr. Andrew Wilner, the author of The Locum Life and the host of the new podcast, The Art of Medicine, that you can find on YouTube and everywhere where you regularly find your podcasts. I'm excited to sit down with you again, Dr. Wilner.
Chad, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to talking about locums.
Well, so today I wanted to talk about Dr. Wilner is also a regular contributor to the Comp Health blog, and one of his recent posts is about mistakes that first-time locums make. We're getting a lot of, right now, there's a lot of interest in locums. We've got a lot of physicians that are starting out for the very first time. They're taking that first locums assignment, and I think in your post you shared a number of tips and hints for people that are just starting out and things to remember. Why don't we'll just jump right into it. Let's start with malpractice insurance. I think a lot of physicians probably don't think about it just because it's part of their permanent physician. How does malpractice come into play when you're working locums?
Right. So, well, I think there's two parts to that. And one part I didn't write about that I think this is a good actually opportunity to talk about is you want to practice in such a way that you're not susceptible to malpractice suits. So you want to do your best to do a great job and document everything and be nice to everybody, particularly in a new place where it might be kind of stressful. So you want to set yourself up so malpractice isn't an issue. On the other hand, I think the statistic is if you're over 55, there's a 50% chance that you've been the target of a malpractice suit. So it's not at all rare. And the longer you practice, the more likely it is to happen. And it may or may not have been something that's your fault. It may just be, you were part of a bad outcome and the people aren't too pleased about it and looking for somebody to blame. And in fact, most malpractice suits do not end up winning over the physician. Usually the physician did the right thing, but it can take years for all that to settle out. So it's my view that you need malpractice insurance. And that is I would say, the prevailing view. There are a few physicians who feel that it's better to have no insurance at all, and that way no one will come after you. But in fact, most states don't even allow that. You must have malpractice insurance in most states. And what may not be apparent is that if you have another job, that the malpractice insurance that you have as part of that employment does not apply to moonlighting elsewhere. So you must have a separate coverage that is going to be responsible for your work outside of your main employment. So say you have a regular, weekly job, you get a paycheck. Malpractice is part of that. But if you go work, say, I'm going to spend 2 weeks and go work in North Dakota, in an ER or a clinic, you have to make sure you have specific malpractice for that. And that can be obtained in a number of ways. The easiest way is if you work with an agency, because the agency knows that you need malpractice insurance, and that's going to be part of your package. So you just have to ask, when you're all done, you say, by the way, did you include and they'll say yes, because the agency doesn't want to be on the hook for some dumb thing that you did, and then you get sued. It turns out you don't have malpractice, and the agency is going to be next in line. So it's not even pure altruism. They want to make sure you have malpractice insurance. It's just part of their job. Now, if you don't use an agency, you may get malpractice through the hospital that you're going to work with. When I worked at the Mayo Clinic, for example, as a locum tenens physician, I had a contract directly with them, and they included me under their broad coverage for all of their physicians. And the third way is that you can get it on your own. If you go work in a clinic and they don't supply it, you can talk to an insurance company just the way you'd get, house insurance or health insurance or some other type of insurance, and you get a policy. And in my book, The Locum Life, there's another chapter that talks about the different kinds of malpractice insurance, right? The kind that covers you forever and the kind that just covers you for when you're working. And that's something else you need to learn about and make sure you get the coverage that you need.
Great. So in addition to that, I mean, kind of knowing, you've got to know about malpractice, but you also have to know what you're doing. So you're a neurologist, but I understand that early in your career, you took some locums work in an emergency room. Maybe talk a little bit about what that was like and what you were faced with your training as a neurologist to be an emergency medicine physician.
Yeah, in retrospect, that's probably not something I would do now, knowing what I know now. In fact, the circumstance was that I had completed my medical internship 1 year after medical school, worked really hard as medical intern at Long Beach Veterans Hospitals, huge VA. And I worked a lot on the inpatient service, ICU, renal, GI, cardiac, I could intubate people, put in lines. But the ER was very sleepy. Nobody came to the VA ER, and I never had an ER rotation. But I wasn't really sure I was going with my career. I wanted to take a year off. I had a book to write. I needed a job. And a bunch of the residents used to moonlight at a community hospital down the road. So I talked to them. I don't know, things were a whole lot more informal those days. I don't remember a contract or anything. Or even if I had malpractice insurance, I mean, I was clueless, but they said, yeah, I could work. I worked 3 12-hour shifts a week. So I'd show up at 7 p.m. and work to 7 a.m. And I was the only doctor in the ER. It was a small 100-bed hospital. They had 2 cots in the ER, but the problem was all kinds of things straight in there. Foreign objects in the eye, dog bites. Say one of my favorite stories is it was a Saturday. Yeah, it was during the day. It was kind of a sleepy day, not a lot to do. And some guy drove their car into the telephone pole in front of the hospital. We heard this giant ruckus. It was a big crash. I don't know if he was intoxicated or, had a heart attack and passed out. So I went out, looked out the door, and there's this mangled, vehicle wrapped around the pole. And the nurses came out, and we looked, and I said, well, they're not going to bring him in here, are they? Well, of course they did, right? I mean, he drove into the hospital practically in the front door, but I wasn't trained, to do trauma. That's a whole other story. So I did my best, ABCs, airway, breathing, cardiac, make sure the guy stays alive. He had broken bones, all kinds of things going on. My job was just to keep him alive. So I was not prepared. So I guess I had books with me, and whenever people would come in, I would call. I said, do you have a doctor? A local doctor, for your arthritis or orthopedic, or whatever it was. They go, oh yeah. I say, so I'd pick up the phone and I would just call and say, I got your patient here. It looks like he may have broken his arm. I'm not too sure. What do you think I should do? And by the end of the year, I would call them and I would say, this is what I want to do. What do you think about that? But I remember month 1, it was like, what do you think I should do? I mean, because I was an intern, I was used to working with residents. So yeah, I guess the moral is you got to know what you're doing, and don't put yourself, say you're going to be a hospitalist, and I use North Dakota, South Dakota, because those are big draws for locum tenens physicians, but you could be the only hospitalist on duty at that hospital at night. So if you're used to being a resident, and always having someone, very quick down the hall you can talk to, or a quick phone call away, all of a sudden you got the weight of the world on your shoulders, for 12 hours. You got to be confident in your skills. And so, in fact, when I interview people from my book about, well, is this appropriate for, newly graduated residents, 2 completely opposite opinions. One opinion was, no way, you don't have enough experience, you should really have a regular job first. The other one's, oh yeah, it's great. If you know what you're doing, you're going to experience, new geography, go to Alaska, go to Hawaii, go to California, plus, new different kinds of hospitals, little hospital, big hospitals, clinic, and really get some experience under your belt before you make that big commitment, for your first kind of real permanent job. So I would say some introspection is in order. you know, before you take the position, you know, and that also applies to mid-career guys. You know, you may have ended up as an endocrinologist, right? And all you see all day is diabetes and thyroid disease, and you're going to take a position as a hospitalist. It's like where you're going to see, you know, all kinds of things and acute pneumonia. And it's like, well, what were those antibiotics again? And, you know, how do you use it? I was pretty good with the ventilator, I remember, as a resident, but I do a lot of ICU work now, as, you know, passing through. You know, I do consultations in the ICU, but I don't run the ICU. And now I can't figure out the ventilators because they're all touch screens, you know, and it's like we had knobs, you know, and the basic concepts are the same, but, you know, it would take me a little while to figure it out. So keep all that in mind. You know, part of the challenge of locums is being in a new place with new people, new routines, just a new physical plant. You know, where's the cafeteria? Where's radiology? You know, you never think about those things when you've worked in a place for a while. But day one, not only do you have to treat the patients, but you got to get yourself kind of sorted out and get familiar with the people. Who can I call? Who's going to give me a straight answer? You know, who's not going to waste my time? That takes a while to figure out.
And I think right in those same lines, every new place you go is going to have a new EMR, and maybe talk a little bit about what that might bring.
Right. So back in South Dakota, there was another EMR adventure. I went there. I did insist on training. They gave me training, but it was 10 o'clock at night. I had patients coming in the emergency room. I was by myself, and I had to admit them to the hospital. So I would write it. Well, normally you would write admission orders, but somehow all of their medications had to be put into the computer and then reordered, so that, because now they're going to become inpatients. And in that hospital, neurology was an admitting service. Neurology is usually a consultative service where the hospitalist admits the patient and you go and you give your 2 cents. But in this case, there was no hospitalist. I was the admission service. I had to ask the hospitalist for his consultation. So I had to do all the groundwork. I had no idea how to do it. I couldn't do it. I was sweating. Patients are piling up. I can't see the next patient because I can't admit the patient in front of me. I called IT. An IT lady, very nice, came to the ER at 11 o'clock at night to help me admit the patient. It was like calling the surgeon in the middle of the night for emergency operation. IT person had to come in the middle of the night, who was quite pleasant and willing to do it. But find out ahead of time which EMR they're using, because there's no way to figure it out, right? EMRs are a black box. They're all easy once you know how to use them. And if you don't know how to use them, good luck. You know, there's no manual. There's no obvious click here, click there. They're tough. You know, we didn't have that problem in the old days, right? But that is a big issue. So I've worked with Cerner, Epic, McKesson, and a long list of others. But and the hospitals are sympathetic to that, but they don't really understand, you know, the people that are hiring you, what's required when you sit down to admit a patient or just do notes. It's hard. So that's kind of up to you. And feel free to insist, you know, your position starts on Monday. You say, well, Monday, you're going to train me on the EMR. Set it up. I'm not going to see patients. And you're not being demanding, because proper patient care requires that I understand how to use the EMR, right? I mean, you want your patients to have proper patient care, don't you? You go, yeah. It's like, okay, train me on the EMR. So don't hesitate to be demanding on that point. Otherwise, you're going to suffer and everybody's going to suffer. That's a big one.
I know that you have a really good attitude about kind of all of these things and kind of facing new things. How important to you is the attitude of a locums physician when they're coming into a new facility?
You know, I learned that's right, that we talk about the 3 A's, you know, affability, ability, and availability, right? Yeah, attitude, affability, it's huge. And in fact, one of the assignments I worked at, there was another locums there, And this guy, I remember he had a chip on his shoulder. You know, he was trained in an academic institution and he didn't really want to be there. He needed the cash. You know, he was doing this extra assignment on his vacation time. And it really radiated, you know. I mean, I didn't care. It didn't have anything to do with me, but I could see that the permanent people who were there did not like it. And after his sort of stint was finished, I remember somebody saying, we're never asking that guy back. And when I go to a locum assignment, for me, it's like, you know, this is a privilege to come in with no overhead, right? All I have to do is show up and do my job, take care of the patients. I don't have to worry about politics. I don't have to worry about, you know, scheduling, you know, within the hospital and the calls, all those things that, you know, I do now in a permanent position. I have to do that. It's a privilege. They're going to pay me really well. This is a privilege. And I've discovered over the years that being nice really smooths the path, makes things a lot easier. And it's just huge. You know, one phrase that's come up is that you are a guest in someone else's house. Act like you're a guest. And I found that's very practical because I think everybody can relate to that. You know, you go visit these people you don't know all that well, you know, somebody from work or somebody your wife met, you know, and you're at dinner in their home. You know, you don't tell them, you know, that painting is really bad. You shouldn't have it over the couch. You should put that in a different. Would that ever occur to you? But if you're a physician, you wouldn't hesitate to say you're in the emergency room. You go, you know, this would work a lot better if you had your intake person over there instead of over here. I mean, that would just be a natural thing to say. But when you're locums, it's better to keep that to yourself because you're temporary and people don't care what you think. They don't want to hear it. They think they're doing it right. And my rule is you have to be somewhere a year before you open your mouth. So the 1 year rule. And some locums positions do last longer than a year. But 1 year rule before you offer any unsolicited comments, even solicited. You say, oh, I think things are great. Just do your work and get done, you know, by 5 o'clock and go home and go explore the, you know, the Grand Canyon or whatever reason it is you took that job in Arizona. It's not to help them do their hospital work better, right? It's to take care of patients, you know, earn a living and have free time to pursue your passion. So just skip all that. It's great.
Absolutely. So the final thing, somebody just starting out, they might be offered a contract that they think, hey, this sounds great. I'm just going to sign on the dotted line and take it. But maybe that's not always the best case. Talk a little bit about kind of negotiating pay and even just a little bit about how locums are paid.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I remember when I was a resident and I took that first job, you know, they told me you're going to get, I don't remember what it was, probably $22 an hour or something in those days. So I said, okay. You know, I mean, when you're a resident, you don't negotiate your salary, right? The hospital just says, this is your salary. And you go, okay. And, or you go somewhere else. But in the business world, all of a sudden, you know, everything is kind of a little bit fluid. So in locums, it turns out you're paid by the hour. And then there are supplements. You're on call, you might get something for that. Come back to the hospital at night, you might get something for that. Work a holiday, you get something for that. And the base pay, you know, it's got to more or less equal what your permanent pay would be, minus with the addition of what they would give you for benefits, because in locums you don't get benefits. So for example, health insurance. If you're full-time employed, your employer is probably going to put out at least $1,000 a month for health insurance. Well, that's going to be built into your locum salary because you're going to have to pay that out of your pocket. So your salary may look, gee, wow, these are big dollars, but those big dollars don't cover vacation time, sick time, disability insurance, health insurance, you know, all those little perks, those are going to come out of your pocket. So keep that in mind. But then the other thing is what they offer you may or may not be negotiable. And your agency, if you work with an agency, the way I understand it is they get a cut out of what you get. So if you get more, they get more. So my experience has been that the agent I've asked, well, could you talk to that hospital, see if they can pay me a little bit more? they're eager to try, you know, unless you come across as so demanding that they're going to lose the assignment, right? You don't want to put yourself in that position. But I did have that experience where I worked in Minnesota. I had a great job. I loved it. 2 years later, they asked me to come back. And, but they offered the same salary that I had 2 years before. And so I asked the agent, I said, you know, maybe they should offer me more. It's been 2 years, you know, at least build in inflation, right? And there was quite a bit in that particular 2-year period. So she asked and I got more. So the way I see it, everybody's happy. I was happy. The agent was happy. The hospital got the doctor that they wanted to come back. So there, you can ask. And of course, that's going to depend on, you know, supply and demand. That's the way it works. So if there's 10 doctors, you know, that want that plum job in New York City, maybe that there's no negotiation. The hospital, you know, has a big choice. You know, if it's North Dakota in January and they can't get anybody and you ask for another, you know, $10 an hour, probably get it. So you don't know. So I find that is a nice kind of perk of using an agent, because they're an intermediary. In other words, you don't have to get into the weeds with the negotiation. You know, you just ask the agent asks. It's like, you know, when you have a real estate agent, you know, you don't talk to the owners of the house. But, you know, when you buy a house, you know, for sale by owner, then you're nose to nose, you know, with the owner. So it's a little different. So having that buffer, I found, was really good, because, you know, you don't want to, it depends on your personality. I'm not a great negotiator when it comes to, you know, money. So I'm very happy to let the agent do it and get their percentage. So you can ask, you can definitely, you know, and ask your agent. The agent may tell you, oh, that hospital, that's as high as they're going to go, because they know. That's the other advantage of the agent. They've often worked with the facilities before. Or they may say, you know, this facility's been looking for somebody for 3 months. They might be interested. Let's give it a try.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. I think those were great tips. You can read more on the Comp Health blog, but just those 5 things. Remember your malpractice. Make sure you know what you're doing. Know how to learn an EMR. Have the right attitude. And number 5, there's always room for negotiation. So thank you, Dr. Wilner. Those are great tips, and I appreciate talking with you.
It's been my pleasure, Chad.